slab up to 5 lakhs now, exempted tax slab. So should help a lot of us save up to 25.
Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, India's first digital live streaming business news service. I am Agam Vakil. First, the headlines. Stocks in Japan and Australia trade flat as investors wait for the Reserve Bank of Australia's policy decision. Major Asian markets remain closed for public holidays. The UK Home Secretary approved the extradition request of Indian authorities to bring back Mallya to face fraud and money laundering charges. The government said it will form a working group to suggest changes in taxing the angel funds received by startups. And Coal India approves share buyback worth 1,050 crores. The record date for the transaction has been decided to be February 15th. And Hindustan Petroleum, GAIL and Tech Mahindra are the Nifty companies to report their third quarterly earnings today. Now, US stocks closed higher on Monday, with the Nasdaq doing much of the heavy lifting. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq both closed above their 100-day moving averages for the first time since October. Abigail Doolittle of Bloomberg News wraps up all the action in this report.
Stocks rallied in Monday's Wall Street session. The major averages, the Dow, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq, all climbed on the day. The S&P 500 and the Dow by about 0.7%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq leading the way, up 1.1%. But the S&P 500 now on a 4-day winning streak, the longest in about 2 weeks. So either way you slice and dice that, a bit of a risk-on tone. Now that's true too when you take a look at the sectors. 9 of the 11 S&P 500 sectors trading higher, just 2 lower. That includes both materials and healthcare up top, though not surprisingly with that Nasdaq strength. Tech on top and followed by the industrials. Now helping out that tech sector, Apple. Apple was up more than 2%, and JP Morgan's out there saying that if the company decides to use its cash pile, perhaps it will consider buying a couple different names, naming Sonos, Netflix, and Activision as possibility. Those shares rallied as well. Other big movers on the day outside of technology, Clorox, a consumer staples name, those shares up more than 5%. At one point, the best day since 2014 on a strong fourth quarter, plus the guidance was quite good. Bristol-Myers Squibb also rallying as Starboard Value is said to have taken a position. Celgene, though, a company that last month BMY made a $74 billion record deal, those shares falling as investors fret that maybe that deal will fall through. Now going cross asset class and taking a look at the commodity space, oil down about 0.9%. This on dollar strength. Haven bonds, though, those were lower, confirming the risk-on tone that we did have in Monday's Wall Street session. From New York, Abigail Doolittle, Bloomberg News.
Well, let's take a look at the trade setup in India here. And we do have the SGX Nifty, which is trending tentatively at this point in time, marginally in the red, about 2.5 points down. But let's move on and talk about how we have seen our markets fare yesterday. And it was, again, largely range-bound, I would say, at least for the indices. But there was a lot of weakness underneath. So as you can see, the mid-cap and the small-cap indices buckling under pressure, where the banking indices showing mixed cues coming in. When it comes to American depository receipts and how stocks have done, well, overnight, we're seeing losses for Tata Motors, Vedanta and Infosys. HDFC Bank remains unchanged. And among the other few counters, we keep an eye on Dr. Reddy's, Wipro, and ICICI Bank as we advance in trade. Once again, very little to speak for when it comes to FIDIs. But when it comes to contributors, that's where I'm keeping an eye on Reliance Industries and the HDFC twins. Of course, Kotak Mahindra Bank also advanced in trade. On the other hand, some weakness in ITC and Larsen & Toubro. But coming down, futures and options, well, we did see a little more buying as far as the Nifty is concerned. The open interest increased by around 4.6%. Your bank Nifty OI also rose by around 6.5%. So positions being taken here. Your open interest distribution indicates a 300-point range, not unlike what we saw in the month of January. And in terms of changes in OI, we've seen writing around the 10,800 put. That's the one that stands out in trade, with 10,900 also in the fray. The Nifty put call ratio edged higher to around 1.67, surprisingly, despite the fact that we really didn't see too much going in there. The Nifty banking put call ratio also now at around 1.04. But Talking about stocks, while we do have IDBI in the bank, we have a new entrant as well, and that's DHFL. So DHFL is a new entry in the F&O ban. And among other stocks, we're watching out for something like a Container Corp, Reliance Capital. In fact, the entire ADAG group it was buckling under pressure, and we did see a lot of shorts building into the system. And of course, this is unwinding. We don't have too much to speak for IDBI Bank Safe for, which is in the F&O ban, so we'll be watching out for that. But with that, let's now go across to, the headlines. And if we can have, so we have Heidi Stroud-Watts from Bloomberg News bringing us the first word.
I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts with the first word headlines. The Aussie dollar slid as weaker imports left a trade balance that beat expectations. December's trade balance coming in at $3.7 billion, about $1.5 billion more than forecast. And there are signs that the economy is slowing. Retail sales in December fell 0.4%, comparing with a forecast of flat sales growth and a rise of 0.4% in November. President Trump's inaugural committee confirms it's been subpoenaed and says it intends to cooperate. It hasn't said who sent the papers, but ABC News reported they come from federal prosecutors in New York. The president is preparing for his delayed State of the Union address with a new government shutdown feared. He's repeatedly said any Congress security deal that doesn't fund his wall would be a waste of time. Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester says she supports Jay Powell's new wait-and-see policy, but adds there may be a need for higher rates if the economy meets her expectations for above-trend growth. She also says Fed policy is neither far ahead nor far behind the curve, which allows the FOMC to gather data before making any further rate adjustments. Google slid in late trading after parent Alphabet reported thinner profit margins and higher spending. Fourth quarter capex jumped 80% to almost $7 billion, while the operating margin fell to 21% from 24%. Alphabet is heavily reliant on its ad business to support sales and profit growth as it develops new offerings such as cloud services and consumer hardware.
The key drivers were first, content acquisition costs, primarily for YouTube, mostly for our advertising-supported content in what is a seasonally strong quarter for YouTube, but also for our newer subscription businesses, YouTube Premium and YouTube TV, which have higher CAC as a percentage of revenues.
Well, it's going to be another earnings-heavy day, and we have three Nifty companies announcing their earnings, starting off with Tech Mahindra. It could be a steady quarter, especially when it comes to the top line, because we are expecting near 4% growth sequentially. When it comes to your top line at a little over 8,945 crores. EBIT could rise around 5% as well, and it is the same for profitability, round about 4%. Do remember margins expected to remain steady at around 15.5% against 15.4%. Now, we all know that Tech Mahindra is heavy on telecommunications, and that is going to be the key driver for growth, considering a 4.5% growth expected as per some analysts out there. So it's going to be communications. But moving on to enterprise business, that's where we could see some amount of weakness coming in. Now, we could see growth, in fact, less than 1%, but all said and done, as long as there is growth, well, investors will take it with both hands. We're expecting the better business mix. Total contract value seen at this point in time, and for this particular quarter, is $300 million. It may be lower sequentially from $500 million, but it still is momentum building for Tech Mahindra, and that could be another key watchable. That said, finally, what we're watching out for is updates on Lightbridge Communications. Of course, the company's management and that is its outlook on 5G capex from clients, which has already kicked off in certain geographies in Europe. We are keeping an eye on traction of deal wins in enterprise business and M&A strategy and capital allocation. Do remember, Tech Mahindra has allocated relatively less capital with respect to dividends or, for that matter, buybacks. In fact, it hasn't carried out any buybacks in comparison to some of its peers. So we'll be watching out for that. But on that note, let's also take a look at HPCL, which stares at a possible operational loss in the third quarter. Weak gross refining margins and higher inventory losses may weigh on the bottom line. Sumit Sarkar is joining us with the analyst expectations. Sumit, how is it looking?
Well, on a standalone basis compared to last quarter, if you see, it is expected to be a weak quarter for Hindustan Petroleum. Now, the revenue is expected to be down by nearly 1% to close to 66,700 crore rupees, while the EBITDA is expected to fall by nearly 78% to close to 459 crore rupees. Margins are expected to come in as low as 0.7%, while the company is expected to report a net loss of close to 1 crore rupees versus a net profit of close to 1,000 crore rupees in the last quarter. Now, gross refining margin, that is the key number for the oil refiner, that is expected to be negative in this quarter at around negative $0.52 per barrel versus $4.81 per barrel reported by the company in the last quarter. Now, it is expected to be a weak quarter for HPCL because of lower gross refining margins, higher inventory losses. In fact, there's a possibility that on the operational front also the company might report a loss, and that is because of the higher inventory losses that are expected in the third quarter of financial year 2019. Now, the gross refining margins are expected to slip in red and be the lowest among the other oil marketing companies. Now, if we see the Singapore gross refining margin, now that averaged lower at around $4.3 per barrel versus $6.1 per barrel because of oversupply situation seen in the global market, and that is the reason why HPCL's gross refining margin is expected to be weak. However, some of these negatives will be offset by the stronger gross marketing margin that these oil marketing companies earned in the third quarter of financial year 2019. Now, marketing margins had recovered smartly in the mid-November and the December period, because of which there could be some relief for this oil marketing companies. Now, the gross marketing margin earned by HPCL on a sale of every liter of petrol, now that averaged around 3.6 rupees per liter versus 1.6 rupees per liter in the last quarter, while on diesel it averaged around 3.2 rupees per liter versus 2.2 rupees per liter in the last quarter. Lastly, on the operational side, if you see, the crude throughput is expected to be down by nearly 3% to close to 4.62 million metric tons, while the sales are expected to be higher by nearly 5% to close to 9.58 million metric tons. Now, key things to watch out for would include management commentary on their crude sourcing strategy and the guidance on future capital expenditure. Now, GAIL India will also be reporting its third quarter earnings today, and if you see on a standalone basis, GAIL India is also expected to report a muted quarter. Our revenues are expected to be down by nearly 2% to close to 19,000 crore rupees, while the net profit is expected to be down by nearly 20% to close to 1,600 crore rupees. EBITDA is expected to fall by nearly 15% to close to 2,500 crore rupees, while the margins are expected to be low by nearly around 13%. On the operational side, if you see, the gas transmission volumes are expected to be low by nearly 3% to close to 1.5 million metric standard cubic meter per day, while the petrochemical volumes are expected to be low by nearly 9% to close to 1,67,000 metric tons. Now, it is expected to be a weak quarter on the back of fall in oil prices, the petrochemical plant shutdown, and because of weaker LNG imports. Now, in the third quarter, the entire focus will be on GAIL's gas marketing segment. Now, in the second quarter, the company had reported strong numbers on the back of this segment, but in Q3, the situation reversed as oil prices sharply declined and Henry Hub prices remained strong, while the spot liquefied natural gas prices remained weak in the third quarter. Now, the petrochemical earnings, they are expected to be weaker because of the 1 month plant shutdown that we had seen, and because of a decline in realizations that were seen because of the fall in the oil prices in the month of December. Now, some of these negatives will be offset by higher profits coming in from the LPG segment of GAIL India. Now, LPG segment is expected to remain strong as the prices were stronger in the October and November month. However, with the decline in oil prices, the LPG segment would also be impacted in the fourth quarter of financial year 2019. However, key things to watch out for would include updates on the pipeline tariffs and implementation of the unified tariff mechanism policy. Along with that, any updates on the commissioning of gas pipeline projects, management commentary on the US LNG contracts, and visibility and on placement of this LNG contracts would be key things to watch out for from GAIL India earnings today.
Biscuit makers have reason to cheer after the government announced a direct transfer of ₹6,000 to small and marginal farmers who have land holding below 2 hectares of land. Now, chai biscuit is typically a breakfast staple for farmers in the low-income group, according to Kamal Agarwal, who's the executive director of Haldiram Foods, which sells Indian snacks like chivda and saved. He believes that snacks spending will not increase due to this. He also said that consumption of pulses, wheat, rice will go up as the farmers will use this additional income largely on food. Now, the Narendra Modi government allocated rupees 20,000 crores for this ongoing financial year and 75,000 crores for the next fiscal under the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. Now, currently more than 85% of the farm holdings in the country is held by farmers who have less than 2 hectares of land. Now, the NSSO report in 2012 stated that nearly 60% of the consumption of the categories under which these households come under usually spend it on food. Now, this income transfer could lead to an additional expenditure of rupees 4,000 to 5,000 crores a year by such families, according to a Credit Suisse report. Now, the report also said that this would support demand for FMCG companies, adding that this money would be given in 3 installments of rupees 2,000 each. Now, Mayank Shah of Parle Products Limited, which sells Parle G biscuits, said that demand for smaller price point packs comes from rural India, which typically has a population of 500 people, because it is consumed as a staple there. Now, R.S. Sodhi of Amul also believes that consumption of biscuits, pulses and basic food items like milk could go up, which provide carbohydrates, proteins and fat to people. Now, Vivek Karve believes that consumptions of oil and shampoos and sachets could go up as the farmers would move from non-branded to branded products.
I think there is some factual deficiency. We don't have full information about it. There can't be 2 different appeals, etc. But in any event, as we are told that he has 14 days to apply for leave to appeal, and then he would be filing one television channel has informed us that he has to prefer this application for leave to appeal before the same secretary. Now, he may have to apply for leave to appeal, but the appeal is not expected to be heard by the same Home Secretary as has wrongly been given to understand. No appeal can be heard by the same authority, which would be contrary to the basic principles of natural justice. If an authority, judicial, quasi-judicial or executive authority has passed an order, and if one is aggrieved and there is a provision of appeal, certainly the appeal would go to somebody else. The same person cannot be the appellate authority, because that would be ridiculous. And therefore, in the instant case also, if he may of course seek leave, which ordinarily the authority would grant, and then the appellate authority would be somebody else. It must be a full-fledged court. So I expect that he would be going to High Court after this seeking of leave to appeal from the Secretary, and then thereafter the proceedings would be heard on merits vis-a-vis the evidence against him.
In total, assuming that Mr. Mallya will, try and save himself to the full extent of the law as it allows him in the United Kingdom, what is the rest of the process that we're seeing? One assumes he will take this all the way to the Supreme Court. What kind of, time period are we looking at?
You see, let us not be very jubilant. And I have seen even from the hospital bed, Arun Jaitley has expressed his happiness that Narendra Modi has another achievement. You see, I think let them not dream. You see, in the practical, on the ground position would be that once he prefers an appeal before a court, that would be High Court. High Court is Queen's Court in London, which is presided over by the Chief Justice and a fellow judge. Division bench hears. We have done this. I have conducted an appeal against extradition order of the magistrate. That time it was Bow Street Magistrate Court. This time in Vijay Mallya's case, it is Westminster Magistrate Court. So I will tell you from my personal experience that appeal is being heard by the High Court, which has wider power to go into the merits of evidence, which the magistrate did not have, or the secretary probably may not have done. So there, the entire prosecution, Crown prosecution case will be heard, the entire defense would be heard, and thereafter the court may choose to set aside the magistrate's order or confirm the magistrate's order, either way, which will consume some time. And let me tell your viewers, after this, again he has a right to appeal before the House of Lords in Westminster. And their House of Lords, again, leave to appeal is to be sought. This is and therefore it is quite time consuming. I don't foresee that Modi government will last till Vijay Mallya physically would be brought here.
Well, bunch of news that we're tracking this morning. I'm going to kickstart with earnings. We're tracking 3 earnings today. First one is Godrej Agrovet, relatively muted set of numbers reported by the company. Top line, we're looking at a 19% uptick, and in terms of the operational performance, it's a 4.1% uptick there. Net profitability of the company, however, has come down by 17% on account of the exceptional profit that we saw in the base quarter. That's to the tune of 12 odd crore. Future retail, well, inline set of numbers reported by the company. Top line 12% uptick there. Net profitability too has risen up by 10%, and operational performance of the company is higher by as much as 29.3%. Balrampur Chini, good set of number reported by yet another sugar company. Top line, it's a good growth. Top line seems to be muted, but then the operational performance of the company is up by 46%, percolating well down on the profitability of the company. Bottom line up as much as 97%. Coal India, that's again going to be a one stock that we're going to keep an eye out on. Buyback to the tune of 0.97% of equity, and amount aggregates to the worth of around 1,050 odd crore. Record date is Feb 15. Vedanta, where Moody's has changed the company's outlook to negative from stable, it comes right after the $561 million structure payment was done by the company's subsidiary to Vulcan Investment. Dr. Reddy's, a positive development coming in on that counter. Indiva loses bid for rehearing in Suboxone's patent case. So that's clearly one development that we like to keep an eye out on. And Bharti Airtel, where Moody's has gone ahead and downgraded a company's long-term rating by 1 notch to BA1, which is a junk rating. And the note says that the downgrade reflects uncertainty whether or not the company's profitability, cash flow situation, and debt levels would improve further here on.
There are two types of notices. I mean, when you say tax notices, one is a notice initiating an assessment or an inquiry. Now, that is something which is issued on the basis of a selection made by the computer. If the case is picked up for scrutiny for some reason by the computer algorithms, but that doesn't mean that there has been a tax. That number may be large. I don't know. I'm not sure. But the other part is that if an assessment has been done and a tax demand notice has been issued, well, that's something that we were trying to fathom. I don't think that number is very large, but we have already issued instructions to our officers to not enforce recovery of tax in those cases. And until the appeals are decided, we are also trying to tell our Commissioner of Appeals to dispose of these appeals at the fastest.
Okay. So you also earlier hinted that there could be a comprehensive policy which would define startups and then how they would be taxed if there is there is a need to be for them to be taxed.
Right. So we are trying to carve out exceptions from that provision of Section 56 to 7B in the Income Tax Act, which has a certain objective and therefore cannot be removed from the statute. However, it does not intend to cover startups or angel investors. So we are trying to carve out exemption. That section gives us the power to notify classes of people, classes of investors, in whose case these queries will not be raised. So that's what we're trying to define.
My last question, sir. There was also a demand from the industry that the return income criteria, that is 50 lakhs now for an angel investor, should be brought down to 25 lakh rupees. So are you also going to look into that?
Well, these are things that we are looking into because, a startup is a very risky venture. I'm sure you appreciate that. It's a high-risk venture. So we are trying to look at parameters which can be compatible with that amount of risk-taking. I mean, we can't expect a person with a net worth of 50 lakhs to have a risk for investing in a startup. So there has to be some parameters, and we are open to discussing all that. That's what we'll be in touch with.
Thank you so much, sir.
Now, there's lots to talk over the course of the day, and you will find all the live market action on Bloomberg Quint. There are also a few stories that you should consider reading on our website, bloombergquint.com. Here they are. In a fresh application filed with the Ahmedabad bench of the National Company Law Tribunal on Monday, 3 directors led by Prashant Ruiya said they should have been consulted before the lenders approved ArcelorMittal's offer as the winning bid. Veteran fund manager Bill Gross announced his retirement after, a 4-decade-long career. Gross, who was the head of Janus Henderson Global Unconstrained Bond Fund, failed to match his stellar track record in the last 4 years of his career. In his next phase, Gross will focus on managing his personal assets and remain active in charitable endeavors, according to a statement from Janus. And on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of All You Need to Know. But stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint for more news and updates. Lots more coming up.